Well, you've heard a lot about lawyers, probably a lot of good lawyer jokes, a lot of bad lawyer jokes. The question is, have you ever met a good lawyer? And today, we're going to introduce you to a good lawyer.
You are listening to Wealth Talks with Dr. Tom and John McPhee, bringing you the facts so you can thrive in life. We have Lee Phillips on the line today. You may have listened to some of our other interviews with Lee Phillips. He's an attorney. He's spoken to thousands of people over his lifetime about estate planning and asset protection. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me. By the way, you do know how many lawyer jokes there are, don't you?
Haven't heard that one.
It's not a joke. There are just 3 lawyer jokes.
Okay.
All the rest of them are true.
There you go.
So speaking of jokes, you've probably heard the one that the lawyer dies and goes to heaven, and he says, there must be some mistake. And Peter says, no. He says, well, I'm only 55 years old. And Peter said, no, according to your timesheets, you're 82.
Right. That's your billing sheet. Got to get the bills in.
I've heard that even Shakespeare had jokes about attorneys, so
lawyers have always been the joke for years.
Yeah. Well, so glad that you can be with us, Lee. We always appreciate you.
So,
anyway.
Yeah, so today we thought we would talk about, we try to keep these podcasts educational. I wanted to ask you, when property is transferred to a trust, people have heard about trusts, a little bit about what they are. We'll talk about that a little bit more today. But who really owns the property when you put it into a trust?
Technically, the trustee owns the property. The trustee holds the property for the benefit of the beneficiaries. So the trustee's name is going to go in title. In fact, there are 3 parts, and these are important parts to remember. There are 3 parts to your trust's name. If you make out a deed in your name, you want your first name and your last name at a minimum, if not your middle name, too. Trust has 3 parts, and all 3 parts of the name have to be on the deed or the bank account signature card or whatever it is. One of them is the name of the trust, and you've named your trust the John McPhee Living Revocable Trust or the Pretty Green Light Trust or whatever.
Okay.
And so there's a name of the trust, a date of the trust, the date that the trust was signed on, and the trustee's name, John McPhee, trustee. All 3 of those elements have to be there. Technically, though, trustee is holding the assets on behalf of the beneficiary. So the trustee's name is always going to be there, and some people get all bent out of shape because the trustee's name's there, and they've heard that you get privacy with a trust. The myth of privacy, in my opinion, is exactly that. The only way you're going to get privacy with a trust is to have somebody else be the trustee, because your name is always going to go on the title of the real estate as trustee.
Sure.
But when you get a straw man to be trustee for you, you're giving up control of that asset to that guy. Now, in theory, he's going to use it for the beneficiary's benefit. That's the fiduciary duty. And actually, the fiduciary duty is a very high standard in the law. If anybody actually understood what the fiduciary duty was, there's no way they would ever act as a trustee. But you act as the trustee of your assets in your living revocable trust, and chances are you're not going to sue yourself. So
you better not.
Well, I'll represent you if you want to.
I'd like to see the timesheet on that one.
So, yeah, I'd be 90. The trustee technically owns it, and so your name goes on, and that blows your privacy. A trust is not really a private document. It's not filed. Nobody needs to know how your assets go when you die, and the trust is distributed. In that sense, it's private. If they go through a will or they go through probate, the assets are all listed and people can read who got what and all of that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, a trust is private. It's never filed. Nobody knows. And in fact, you might remember that when Michael Jackson died, for the first 2 weeks after his death, man, the press was drooling, slobbering all over themselves because there was going to be a big fight over all of his assets. And about 2 weeks after his death, it came out that everything was held in a living revocable trust, and you didn't hear a thing about it after that. The press couldn't get to it. Nobody could see it. Who cares? The whole juicy thing just went away in an instant.
So you mentioned a revocable living trust. How does that vary from an irrevocable trust, Lee?
Well, it's pretty simple. One of them is revocable, and the other one isn't.
Do you give up more control over one or the other?
Well, usually the revocable trust is the one that you use for estate planning, and it's a probate avoidance tool is what you're doing with it. And it works really well, and I think you should use it. But you can revoke it. You can get the assets back. You can move the assets wherever you want. You can do whatever you want with them. They are your assets. In fact, you'll use your Social Security number. Some people get a tax ID number, but technically the IRS doesn't want you to get a tax ID number for your living revocable trust. They call it a disregarded entity. It is you. They disregard the fact that you have a trust. And the courts do, too. Since you can revoke it, there's no asset protection. You get it back anytime you want. And I get a judgment against you, and I go in and say, hey, I got a judgment against you. Judge, everything is over there in that trust, that revocable trust. Make them revoke it and give me all the assets. And the judge will do that every time. So revocable is, I'm going to say, easier to manage in the sense that you haven't really done anything except performed a legal trick so that you can avoid probate. And we'll have to talk about probate and legal tricks and stuff some other day.
Okay.
But the irrevocable trust is different in that once you put the assets in, you can't get them back. It's irrevocable. You can't change the terms of the trust. It's irrevocable. Technically, some of the terms you can change and still have it give you the tax benefits of an irrevocable trust and stuff, but it's a different gig. What you're doing is you're giving the assets to the trust. Indirectly, you're giving the assets to the beneficiary or beneficiaries, and you don't get a benefit out of those assets anymore. If you do get a benefit out of the assets, it's what we call a self-settled trust. And our society doesn't like that, because if you have the ability to move your assets away from yourself to an irrevocable trust, which is a real entity. It's not a disregarded entity. It's a real live entity. It has its own tax ID number and files its own tax form 1041 and everything else. You have moved those assets away from yourself, and your creditors can't get to them anymore. But wait a minute. If you move the assets away from you, and your creditors can't get to them, and you still get all the benefit out of the assets, that's not fair. And our courts, our society has basically said that's not fair. That's a self-settled trust, and we're not going to let you do that. Now, there are about a dozen states that will let you do that now in the last 25 years or so. Started with the Alaskan Trust and up in Alaska. And the catch usually is that you can't be the trustee, or at least you have to share trusteeship with a bank in the state where the trust is located. Now, the property could be in Minnesota and the trust could be in Alaska, but it's governing that Minnesota property.
Interesting.
So the trustee needs to be the bank, and originally Alaska figured it was a way to get money into their banking system because the trustee's going to charge you a fee. These self-settled trusts, asset protection trust, legacy trust, Alaskan trust, whatever you want to call it, they also have another catch, and that is when you move the assets into them, they're irrevocable. You can't get them back. They're gone. They're not subject to your creditors anymore. But they usually have, the common is a 5-year waiting period before they actually lock down into the trust and are free from your creditors. Otherwise, we're going to call it a fraudulent conveyance and bring them back.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So life insurance, which we deal with quite a bit, uses a irrevocable life insurance trust, and sometimes we often use charitable remainder trusts. Can you explain just a little bit to the listeners what a charitable remainder trust looks like?
Well, these are all different types of trusts. The concept of the trust is the same, but the rules primarily with the IRS that create these trusts, different trusts, are obviously different for each type of a trust. A charitable remainder trust, you might know it as a CRT, that's what lots of people call it, is a trust which allows you to donate assets to it today, and you get a full tax deduction for the fair market value of the asset the day you contribute it to the trust. The catch is you're giving that asset away. It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you that I do not like it because people say, oh, you do it so that you can avoid paying capital gains tax on the piece of property. That's true. If you give it away and you get the full tax deduction, you don't have to pay capital gains on the property when the charity sells the property.
Sure.
Once you lost the property.
But you've lost your property. That is true. The property's gone, and I had a case here. A neighbor had a $3 million piece of property, and he comes to me and says, no way am I paying capital gains tax on the sale of this property. I'm going to give it away in a charitable, he says, I'm going to set up a charitable remainder trust, and everybody says that I'm going to avoid the capital gains tax. And that's exactly what he did, in spite of the fact that I asked him not to. And it worked really well. He got a tax deduction for the $3 million the day he gave it to them. Technically, he can get the benefit of the property. This was raw land, so there wasn't much benefit. But if it's a property that's spinning off a benefit, he could have received that during his lifetime. But the remainder goes to the charity. So it's a charitable remainder trust. The remainder goes to the charity when he dies. Guess what? He died. And they had not set up the trust the way they could have, in that his wife was not a part of the trust.
Oh, that's too bad.
And when he died, the $3 million disappeared into the charity. And his wife has had a really hard time for the last 10 years or so since he died.
Wow.
That's hard.
Now, they do use life insurance. You ask about a life insurance trust. This isn't that use of life insurance, but they will often use life insurance to replace the value of the $3 million piece of land that you put into the charitable remainder trust. So I get a tax deduction today, and yet when I die, my family still gets the benefit of $3 million because the life insurance policy will pay off and replace the value of the $3 million piece of property. So it works quite well, and I don't know if you use life insurance that way or not, but the only value that I see in a charitable remainder trust is it's a very good way to give a gift to a charity and get the tax deduction now when you need it instead of when you die. But there is, you've got to have charitable intent in your heart, and that has to be the pure motive, in my opinion, for setting up one of these charitable remainder trusts. If you really want to give the property to the charity, let's do it. This works cool.
I think that's a really, really important idea to keep in mind when you approach a charitable remainder trust. And without the life insurance replacing the value, it would be 100% just because I want to give this money away.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
You can get a tax benefit out of it today by giving it away and still have the value go to your family. You can use income that the property spins off
Sure.
to buy the life insurance policy, and it works, but unless you have pure charity in your heart, don't do it. That's my
That's
take.
good advice. Good advice.
Good advice. So 2020 has been a pretty crazy year, and it's not just the virus happening, but also it's affected people financially, and they're thinking about how to make their future better. One of the things that they're doing is thinking about protecting themselves with life insurance. People are getting life insurance in record numbers. Something else that people are thinking about doing is planning for their future, whether it's their estate or planning for their asset protection in the future. They're thinking a little bit more about those things. What would you say to people that are thinking about planning for the future so that it's better and they're not affected quite as seriously by something like this in the future?
Well, have you got 10 hours on this podcast?
Not quite that long.
COVID has reminded people that they are mortal.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them have thought, well, maybe I really ought to get my ducks in a row, so to speak, and do some estate planning. And they certainly should do that. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm an advocate of the living revocable trust for most people. And it avoids probate and makes it so that the estate administration goes a lot cleaner.
Okay.
So, I've dealt with that for 40 years now.
Mm-hmm.
As far as asset protection, people are having economically difficult times. They are losing their little business. And what we need to do asset protection-wise is make it so that if they do lose their little business, that they don't necessarily lose their rental properties and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So legally, we put them into different pockets. We use different legal tools, corporations, LLCs, limited partnerships, all kinds of tools, trusts, in order to create legal pockets. And the concept is if you're walking down the street and you get your wallet picked, you're through.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've taken some of the money out and put it in your front pocket, then when you get your wallet picked, you only lose a little bit of money. You don't lose it all.
Yeah.
And the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, that's cool. So what we're going to do is take some of the money out and put it in our front pocket. And we'll put our $100 bill in the sole of our shoe, and we're going to stuff some down our underpants and our bra. By the way, John, I look really good in a bra. No.
I didn't think so.
I don't think so either. But at any rate, the problem is you put your money all over like that. You walk into 7-Eleven to buy a Slurpee, you've got to undress to make change.
Yeah.
You've gone way overboard.
Yeah.
Don't let the lawyers shove you over the cliff. They'll do as many of these pockets, these legal entities, as you'll pay for. Trust me.
Mm-hmm.
So the LLC is an excellent tool. You need to learn about it because it protects you with the corporate shield, which protects you from what happens in the rental unit or in the company, and it protects the company assets from what happens to you. And 56% of all bankruptcies in the United States are a result of somebody in the family gets sick. So the question is, are you going to lose your little business? Are you going to lose your rental properties when somebody in the family gets sick? And the answer for most people is yeah.
Yeah.
So, I've tutored, you said I've spoken to thousands of people. No, it's more like millions of people.
Okay.
In my career. So I've helped hundreds of thousands of people do this. I've developed kits that allow them to do their own LLCs and You can know 10 times more about an LLC than your lawyer does, trust me. You just need somebody to sit you down and teach you about it.
Certainly. Yeah, your kits have certainly been very helpful for us as we look at setting up the living revocable trust that you mentioned to help avoid probate, and also the LLCs, which help with the asset protection and creating those different pockets to put assets in.
By the way, John, one of the pockets is life insurance.
It is.
Life insurance is protected by almost all states. If you put it in an irrevocable life insurance trust, or they call it an ILET, then it's pretty much 100% protected.
Yes.
You can't borrow against the funds and stuff at that point. So if you're using it as a non-qualified retirement plan, which is an excellent thing to do, then you don't want it in an ILET. You want it outside of the ILET. But even at that, most state laws protect the life insurance. The reasoning is, if I take the life insurance away from the family and Dad dies, I've got a bunch of people on welfare and stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas the life insurance could take care of them. So the states have protected the life insurance, and that's one of the pockets.
You know, something that's really surprising, but most people that we talk to don't realize you can own more than one life insurance policy on your life, too. So there's no reason why you can't have one policy that is in an ILET that's totally protected in all 50 states, and another one that's there just to provide liquidity when you die, for those that are having to deal with the estate after you're gone.
Yeah, my wife died a year ago. You know that.
Yes.
She sent me wonderful flowers, and I appreciate that. And you guys have been really great with me. But she had a life insurance policy, and it didn't make us rich by any means, but the extra several $100,000 that it paid out after her death certainly helped with expenses, and it was just kind of nice. And it's been expensive to lose her.
Yeah.
There were expenses leading up to her death, and there are expenses after her death. In fact, today, it's a celebration. We finally got her estate tax return filed.
All right.
Signed it today.
Wow.
And that's a pain, but
That's a year later.
Even a year and 14 months later.
Wow.
You can get up to 15 months to file that if you file an extension at 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
But there were. I haven't charged any legal fees, obviously. Well, maybe I should. It might but just in appraisal fees and accounting fees and everything else, there's at least $10,000 in it.
Yeah.
And if you were paying a lawyer, there'd probably be 25. So the life insurance is just something that smooths the way for a family.
Yeah. Now, Lee, I don't know if you had a policy that had a chronic illness rider on it or not on your wife.
I did.
Were you able to tap into that while she was still living?
I could get like 50% of the face value, which would have been a couple $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as she was diagnosed. She had ALS, and that's a totally fatal disease. We know she's going down. I did not do that. I was blessed to just have my own funds on hand.
Sure.
Didn't need to play that game.
That has been,
but yes,
that's a real helpful
advantage
for many people.
Of life insurance.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, we just had a client that just bought his policy this year, and evidently the medicals weren't accurate enough because he had a heart attack just like 6 months later, and he was able to get a $40,000 check just from the insurance company when he only paid less than $5,000 in premium.
Yeah, statistically they lost on that one, but they have actuaries and they know exactly how much the insurance pays out.
That's correct.
That's right.
That's correct.
Yeah. So with the the kits that you have available for the LLCs and the Living Revocable Trust, one of the ones that has been the most helpful for us is the accumulation and preservation of wealth system that you have available. And I think that's $24.99 on your website, right?
It is.
Yeah. Okay. And
that's not $24.99.
correct. Yeah. $2,499. And you can call our office because those of you who are life benefits clients, and you can order that and get an extra $500 off. So it's only $1,999. And that's been super helpful for our family. It's been helpful for many of our clients who want to make sure that their assets are protected and that they're doing the very best possible to plan their future so that their family has everything in order.
I just have to step in here and say that after 20 years of being in business as a doctor, I talked to an attorney and I said, I think I should get incorporated. And he said, you're about 20 years too late. And so we got incorporated. And when we started the life benefits company, we incorporated. But having listened to Mr. Philip Lee Phillips's presentation and going through his work, we refiled all our corporate documents because we saw the protection that and the logic and the reasoning, the legal reasoning behind what Lee Phillips is telling us, and we just realized we needed that extra protection. So even though you might have a corporation or an LLC or might be in a partnership with someone, you need to get this information. You need to read it and understand it. Listen to what Lee has to say, because it's amazing how many times an attorney will help you walk through something and it never gets funded like in a trust, or you never file the right paperwork like in a LLC or a corporation, and you're just walking around just as like a sitting duck, and you just paid an attorney a bunch of money.
Well, the trick of the attorney is the piece of paper very seldom does you much good if you don't learn how to use it. And they kind of forget to tell you how to use it. That way they get the fee for setting up the document, and then when there's a mess, they get the fee for cleaning up the mess. So it works really good for us.
And there's really two aspects in the protection of LLC or corporation. It's the personal protection, but it's also some tax protection as well. Would you say that's true, Lee?
I'll tell you what, you guys. I've got a course out. It's $7.99 on the internet. It's called the Advanced Tax Tactics, and it's about 4 or 5 hours of audio instructions on how to do your taxes. And the IRS is your biggest asset protection threat. They're taking half of it, and don't tell me they don't get it, because they do. They don't even call it taxes anymore. They just call it fees. But I will include that Advanced Tax Tactics course, and you ought to be able to save thousands of dollars a year when you understand above the line and below the line accounting and all kinds of stuff that we talk about in there. You ought to be able to save thousands of dollars each year. I will include that course with the accumulation preservation of wealth set for your folks that listen to the podcast and ask for it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's an awesome offer and a great deal for anybody. So the accumulation and protection of wealth.
So they can call our office to get that. Just ask to speak with John, and I'll be able to help you with that. You can call us at 702-660-7000. You can also email me if you're listening to the podcast, john@wealthtalks.com, and we'll get you the information to get both of those systems, the accumulation and preservation of wealth system, and plus the advanced tax tactics course that Lee just mentioned for you. It's a lot of value there, and you'll get the tools that you need in order to protect your family properly.
And you're going to put that on the resource page too, as well.
Yes, I'll put the information on the resource page, so you'll have my contact information there. Just contact me if you're a life benefits client. We'll make sure you get that information. Go ahead.
I'm going to teach you how to make them tax deductible.
Ah, very good.
Very nice.
Well, might as well start.
Yeah, it should be a business expense, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, Lee, it is always so good to talk with you, and we're just glad that you're not only have helped us legally, but you're a friend of ours, and you're an honest attorney. That's amazing.
Oh, no,
that's amazing attestament.
No such thing.
So, any last words you'd like to leave our listeners today before we sign off?
appreciate all you guys. Appreciate the McPhees and all of the many docs and students at McPhees that I've worked with over the years. So thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. You provide some great information, some great resources, and we're always happy to share that because it's so helpful to people. You're listening to Wealth Talks with Dr. Tom and John McPhee, bringing you the facts so you can thrive in life. Have a wonderful week.